14 months or 15 months every day. When you're on private duty, that's what you did. I worked from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. And I mean, the pay was good. It was $7 a day. And of course, then I really did not know Elizabeth as well as I should have, because she'd be worn out and ready for bed, and she'd be with Graham all day. So she became Graham's child, frankly, more than mine. But then there were rumors about people being able to get back into Nanking and into Shanghai and inland cities. And so they would not honor my old passport because they would not allow people to just go back. You had to go back for a very special reason. I mean, you weren't going as just a tourist or something like that. And it was very difficult to get the passport. So Dad's cousin was working in the State Department at that time, and so I wrote to him, and he got my passport approved. And so I left with Elizabeth, and of course on the train, and started back across the country to take the boat out of Los Angeles. I don't remember, it was one of the Pacific lines, and we went by the Aleutian Islands, and it was in the winter time, and it was very, very seldom that we could go out on deck because the snow and the hail and the ice, it was just simply terrific. But I had a very funny incident going back across the country on the train. Elizabeth was just at that age where she wanted, obviously, to run around a lot. And during the day, that's what she would be doing, running up and down the train. And of course, people got acquainted with her, and so she'd be jabbering a little bit to people. But there was one man that I kept going by that was smoking a pipe. And the odor of the tobacco was very familiar. It smelled an awful lot like the tobacco that Dad smoked. And he would talk to Elizabeth. And after a couple of days, one day I stopped by him and I said, you know, I just must say to you, that pipe tobacco that you smoke is really, really awfully good. I love the smell of it. And I said, you know, my husband used to smoke a tobacco in his pipe. It smelled very much like that. And I said, as a matter of fact, even the pipe that you're using, that you're smoking, is an awful lot like the pipe that I bought for my husband on his last birthday. It was a Dunhill pipe. And he said, he looked at me with such a peculiar look in his face, and he said, I beg your pardon. He said, what is your name? And I said, my name is Mrs. Wilson. He said, what? I said, my name is Mrs. Wilson. I said, my husband, I'm on my way out to Los Angeles, and I'm going to get on one of the President lines. No, I was going to Los Angeles, and then I had to go up to Vancouver for the President lines. That's it. And I said, and he said, well, that's very peculiar. He said, because I had a Dr. Wilson who was going out to China that was on the freighter that I was captain of, and he said to me, you know, he said, I'm going to be a medical missionary, and I think that I had better stop smoking when I arrived. So here is the tobacco, and here is the pipe. I want you to have it. And by golly, it was the captain of the freighter that Dad had gone out. Now, of all things to happen in this whole world, to be on a train going across the United States and coming upon the captain of the freighter that Dad had gone out on, and he had the Dunhill pipe that I had given Dad, and also the same kind of, some of the tobacco probably that Dad had had. Okay, so then, so after this 19 days on this Pacific line, crossing the, going the northern route, the Aleutian Islands, and it was in the winter time, I arrived in Shanghai, and of course Dad met me, and that's, I think I said before, we stayed with the Ferguson girls for a couple of days and then went on up to Nanking. Well, when we arrived in Nanking, the Riggs family, who lived in a really quite nice house, all the missionary houses were really very nice. The Riggs family had left on their regular furlough, and so we inherited their house, which was very, very nice, and we enjoyed it very much. And we stayed there, and then after we were under Japanese rule, remember, at that time, and there were very, very few foreigners in Nanking. I think there were a group of 60 foreigners in the whole of Nanking, and many of the foreigners were the English BAT people, British American Tobacco people, or the Soak and the Oil people, who were a Standard Oil company, and they used to call themselves Socony Oil. They lived down in the other part of town, so maybe there were at least 20 or 25 of that kind of people that lived way down the other part of town, and then maybe there were 40 or 50 of us that lived around where we were. And after we were there, after I was back just a short while, the hospital decided that Dad really should take a few weeks off. So the Soap and the Oil people had a summer place in Tsingtao, which is up quite a bit up north, and so they said, why don't you go to our house up in Tsingtao, and the sand, it was right on the ocean, and the sand and everything, it was just gorgeous. And so we were up there for about between 2 and 3 weeks, and we took Chunts out to the Yama with us, and I learned to ride a bicycle up there, and I learned to ride the bicycle in the town at Tsingtao, which was nothing but cobblestones. All those towns were cobblestone. And every day I'd come back, and Dad would bandage my legs, and especially my knees, because they'd be all scraped to pieces and bleeding. Well, finally I conquered the bicycle, and which was great. So then when we got back to Nanking, and when we went up to, this was interesting, when we went up to Tsingtao, we took the railroad train. And of course, as I say, the whole place was under Japanese rule. And so at every stop, they'd make everybody get out of the train, and the Japanese officials, who were very dominant people, would look over everybody, and then if nothing happened, or if they didn't think they had to inquire of anything, they'd let you get back on the train, and off we'd go again. Well, this one time, of course, Dad had such a great sense of humor, and he always said to me, now, when we have to get off the train, I don't want you to be with me, because if anything happens, then I'll take care of it. So you always take Elizabeth and stay close to Chunsoutsa. So we got off at this one station, and I was standing over on the side, sort of, with Chunsoutsa and Elizabeth, and these very dominant Japanese officials were sort of throwing their weight around, and they went up to Dad, and of course we were the only foreigners on the train, so they went up to Dad, and the one man said to him, and I could see this, I was watching Dad at the corner of my eye, and I could see this little twinkle in his eye, and I knew something was going on. And the Japanese said to him in his broken English, something about, who is that lady you're with? And of course Dad says, that isn't any lady, that's my wife. The old joke, you know. Yeah. Obviously the Japanese major, whoever he was, naturally he got no kick out of it at all, but we did, and we laughed our heads off, and that made him furious. But he let us get back on the train, and Dad and I laughed our heads off for about an hour after that. Okay, so then we went back to Nanking and had a terrible time after the train landed to get back over with our baggage, because they wouldn't allow any coolies to help us, and we had to carry our own baggage, and Chunsoutsa carried part of the baggage, Dad carried part, because remember we had to take all our food and everything with us, because there was no way of getting any food in Tsingtao, and I had Elizabeth and a couple of other bags. Well, finally we got home and we were absolutely exhausted. Well then, I would go over to the hospital every day. Well, you never knew from one minute to the other what was going to happen. I mean, I might start out on my bicycle to go to the hospital, and all of a sudden there'd be a roadblock where the Japanese would have the road blocked off, and I'd have to come back and go a roundabout way to get to the hospital, all that kind of thing. Well, then I have to tell you, Dad always, as a kid, had all kinds of animals. Always had all kinds of animals, loved them. And he especially liked pigeons. And so when I got back and we got into the Riggs house, one of the first things he had done was in one of the upstairs bedrooms, he had a cage sort of built outside of the window, and he bought some pigeons and trained them, and he rode a bicycle also, of course, to the hospital. And after he'd come home to lunch almost every day, and then when he'd get ready to go back to the hospital after lunch, he'd first go upstairs and open the pigeon cage and whistle. And these pigeons would come out. All these pigeons would come out, and they'd follow him almost all the way to the hospital. He had them trained. They'd follow him almost all the way to the hospital, and then he'd have whistle or do something, and they'd come back and get in the cage, and then I'd close the door. And I have a pigeon whistle. We had many different kinds of pigeon whistles, which Dad would hold the pigeon, and I would sew a pigeon whistle on, you remember I have that one on the brass table at home, and then I would sew the pigeon whistle on the end feathers of the pigeon, and each pigeon had a different shaped whistle, so that each pigeon, as they would fly over to the hospital, and when the wind was blowing, each whistle would make a different kind of a noise. It was absolutely gorgeous chorus, just beautiful. Well, you know, that's just one little thing that sticks in your mind and was absolutely terrific. There were many things that happened during the occupation, as I say. One time, we always had curfew, and we had to be in. All women, foreign women and children would have to be off of the streets by 6 o'clock. And one time, I was invited down to Soconee-Oil, to the hill, to a birthday party for some other little children from the British American Tobacco Company and Soconee-Oil people. And I guess we forgot the time, and it was a little late when I got started to go home, and it took about, at least a half an hour or more in the rickshaw to get home. And the Soconee-Oil people, of course, having lots of money, had beautiful gardens and beautiful homes and everything. And this one gal gave me this huge bunch of gorgeous flowers, which I had here, and I had Elizabeth here. I got to the end of our street, and apparently it was a few minutes after 6 o'clock, and the Japanese, there were 5 or 6 Japanese across the street, and they stopped me and sent the rickshaw man on his way, which I was glad, because I didn't want him to have to account for me or to come to any harm, because he was taking me home after a few minutes after 6. So I try to communicate with them, saying that my house was right down there, and I had this baby and she was tired, and I tried to, by different words and hand signs and everything, tried to tell them, and the more I tried to tell them, the more angry they would get, and they kept saying, no, no, no. And I said, yes, 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 I go, baby, baby, I go. Well, this one Japanese got very, very angry, and he pulled his pistol out of his holster. And so I thought to myself, oh boy. Now if I stand here, maybe he's going to shoot me. And if I go down the street, maybe I can bluff him. Or maybe he'll shoot me in the back. So, you just take your chances. So I just bundled those flowers up, huge bunch of flowers on this arm, Elizabeth on there. And I looked him in the eye, and I started down that street, and he cocked his pistol right at my back. And I thought, if I stop and show him that I'm afraid of him, then maybe he will kill me or shoot me in the arm or something. And by golly, I'm not going to show him I'm afraid of him. And so I just walked right down that street. And I can tell you, I was scared. I was scared to death, and my legs were trembling. But I walked down that street all the way down, and I got home. When I got home, Dad was waiting for me, pacing up and down. It was after 6 o'clock, and where was I? And I told him what had happened, and was he furious at me? He said, don't you ever do a thing like that again. Don't you ever be out after 6 o'clock. Well, that was the kind of thing, that happened all the time. I mean, that's the way you lived. I mean, you just did those kind of things. And there was another time, this was the funniest thing. I had to go down to Shanghai to the dentist. Something had happened. I had a toothache. I don't remember exactly what. So I had to get of course, you had to get a permit to go on the train to go down to Shanghai. Dad took me to the station in Nanking. And here I was met with a horse's trough, just like a horse drinks out of. There was this big horse's trough, and it was filled with, it must have been filled with chloride of mercury or something like that, some kind of terribly strong antiseptic. And they had little tiny cups. And before you got on the train, you had to take that cup and dip it in this antiseptic and then spit it out back in the trough. Well, knowing me, I took the cup and I filled it and I let it dribble down my front of my dress, and then I put the cup back down, and the Japanese said something to me, and I said in English, which I'm sure he never understood, that I had done what I was supposed to do. But I can just, even today, I can just see the way that even looked and the people that had to do that kind of thing. But I got down to Shanghai and stayed for 2 or 3 days getting my teeth taken care of, and Uncle John happened to be in Shanghai, and he took me out to dinner, I remember, one night. And then I came back on the train, and I don't remember much else about it. There apparently were no incidents coming back on the train, because Dad met me, and we nothing happened, so we got home all right. But of course, as I say, we just didn't do much of anything. We did go over to the American Embassy a lot. Now, the American Embassy, before that time, the American Embassy was stationed in Peking, but at this time, the American Embassy was really in Nanking, and we went over there a lot. We went to the German Embassy quite often, because you see, there were so very, very few foreign people in Nanking to associate with, and we never really were terribly friendly with the other missionaries, because, well, we were more for having a little fun and stuff. So we always, most of our association were with the embassy people and the English people and the Socony oil people. And we went, I remember one time going over to the Swedish embassy, and they had cocktails, I remember, before, and it was that aquavit that the Swedes drink. Now, I've never had any aquavit before. Well, that stuff, I tell you, can just kill you with one sip. Well, anyway, we did enjoy ourselves then to a certain extent, being confined as we were, and being having such a small group of people, and not having. Then I remember, for instance, a whole bunch of us gals from the American Embassy, Hilda Anderson and Margaret, somebody, 2 or 3 others, we got together and we put on a play, and we invited everybody in the community to come and see the play. That was a success. And then the highlight of, another big thing, in those days, the Montgomery Ward catalog was that was a big thing. The Sears catalog was nothing. And about 2 or 3 times a year, the Monkey Ward catalog would come. Well, when we were confined under the Japanese rule, this was a great event. Hilda Anderson, who was stationed at the American Embassy, would send a chit written note with the coolie over and say, Marjorie, come on over to dinner tonight. The Monkey Ward catalog has arrived. Now, this was a big, as I say, a big event. And there were 4 or 5 of us would get together. Maybe it would have to be about 4 o'clock in the afternoon because we had to get back to the house early. And we'd sit down on the floor and go through this, when you think about this crazy things, This was a big event. You'd go through the Montgomery Ward catalog. And that absolutely made the whole week and your whole day. You talk about this for months, about the Monkey Ward catalog arriving in town. I have something down here about a birthday party. Now I have to go back.
You can't go back, you've got to go forward.
Well, I know, but I have to say something about something that happened that I missed. Can I do that, though? I can do that.
It's your show.
Okay. While I was home working, the Reader's Digest contacted me. And I was getting these letters from Dad, which I still have, and I have tried to put them in order. And telling me about different things that were happening in Nanking, how he was living and so on and so forth, about the atrocities, and somehow or other, I guess it was the American Embassy maybe, let them know that I was here and these letters were coming through, usually through the diplomatic pouch or through maybe a New York Times man would bring some out. And the Reader's Digest wanted to know if they could go through some of these letters and publish them. Well, I had to get in touch with the Board of Missions to ask them permission to do this thing, and they said yes, that I could. So the Reader's Digest went through the letters that I had received up to that time, and I don't remember the exact date. I had been home maybe 6 months or so, and they offered me $200 if they could take excerpts from these letters and publish them. So I again had to get in touch with the Board of Missions to ask them, if I could accept the $200, and if so, was I going to have to hand it over to the mission board? And they said no, that they would give me permission to have the Reader's Digest use the letters and I could keep the money. So then I got to thinking about it and I thought, gee, $200 for something that the Reader's Digest was going to publish didn't seem quite kosher to me. So I got in touch with one of Dad's very good classmates that I knew very, very well. He was a lawyer. And I called Cuff, and Cuff came over and talked to me about it, and he said, let me take care of it for you. So apparently he got in touch with the editors of the Reader's Digest and said that, we would accept absolutely nothing under $700, which they were very, very glad to give me. So I took the $700 and I put it in a bank to save for some future use. And then the Reader's Digest came out with this article, and I think, do you have the magazine? I think you had the magazine in the office. Because Elizabeth had it and I took it away from her.
I know, it's around somewhere.
Huh?
I don't know where it is. I've seen it.
Okay. Then also, Dad's picture was on the outside of Life magazine. Now, not a full face, but you could definitely identify part of his side of his face and his bald head with a little fringe of red around. Well, I had several of the Reader's Digest and I had several of the Life magazine in my suitcase when we went back, because I wanted to take them back, and I never dreamed about buying a whole bunch of them and leaving them here. And when I got to Shanghai and we went through customs, of course, the Japanese took the several copies of the Reader's Digest that I had away from me, and they took I had several copies of the Life magazine with Dad's picture on the front that they took away from me. So I never did have any more of those Life magazines, and I have one Reader's Digest, and I don't know what, frankly, I know Elizabeth had it, and I don't know whether she still has it. I thought I gave it to you for the art.
You know what month and year the Life was?
Was 1937, I cannot remember
I've
the
never
month.
seen the light.
Pardon?
I think
never
Liz
saw
has
the light.
Reader's Digest.
Pardon?
You gave Liz Reader's Digest.
I thought I gave her the Reader's Digest, and I think
Thought it
she
came
still
back,
has it, but we'll have to, do you think we might get a copy?
I think we might try.
Okay, well, I'll have to ask Elizabeth then, when that was. Well, then the $700, as I say, that I got from the Reader's Digest was put away, which we used later when we came back to buy a